From Fox 22, this is the Maine GOP 2nd Congressional Forum.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our special election coverage leading up to the Republican primary. I'm Beth Jones.
And I'm Peter Dubois. Before voters head to the polls in November, they'll have some decisions to make on primary day. And among those decisions, voters will decide who faces off against incumbent Democratic Representative Jared Golden, who currently represents Maine's 2nd Congressional District.
Two Maine state lawmakers are vying for that opportunity, Representatives Austin Theriault and Mike Sobolewski. We wanted to help our viewers make an informed decision, and it was important to us that each candidate get an equal opportunity to represent themselves. Each was given 28 minutes uninterrupted and was asked the same questions. Those questions touching on a variety of state and national topics, so you would know where they stand on the issues that matter to voters.
We start our coverage tonight with my conversation with Maine State Representative Austin Theriault. Welcome in, everyone. I'm joined now by Representative Austin Theriault from Fort Kent. Representative Theriault, thanks so much for joining us today.
It's great to be with you.
All right, and let's get right into the questions. It's great to be able to speak with you today, and let's start out by talking a little bit more about your background, who you are, and what part of Maine you're from, and just giving us some of those background details.
Absolutely. So for folks that don't know, I'm from Aroostook County. I'm very proud to be from the county, from a small town in Fort Kent of about 4,000 people. And you know, what I remember from childhood about growing up in that area was everybody supports each other, right? There's a sense of community. There's a sense of people working together, making sacrifices. And I tell the story of my grandfather. He's 82, he's still with us. And he dropped out of school in 4th grade. He grew up in Santa Gut, which is like a farming community in the St. John Valley. Because there was 13 kids at the farm, and there was some question as to whether or not they were going to be able to make it through the winter if the kids actually didn't go to work. So he made sacrifices for our family. And I think it's time that every generation takes a step back and says, well, what kind of sacrifices are we going to make for the next generation? Obviously, my background's different than my grandfather, but being from the St. John Valley, you know that hard work is important, dedication, service to the community. At an early age, I worked in our trucking company, our logging company, which is what my grandfather started back in '87, I believe. Time flies. And my father works in that as well. I mean, it's like a family affair. The Theriaults have been known to be entrepreneurs. So, you know, think of my grandfather, my father, my uncles. My grandmother was right involved in the business. She kept the books. So I worked in the family business as a teenager. And you know, you see the ins and outs. You work side by side with people that are making $12, $13 an hour, and the sacrifices they have to make for their kids to be able to provide. At a certain point, I had an opportunity to go NASCAR racing, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in a second. But so many doors opened for me, and just very grateful for that. I met so many great people along the way that just gave me opportunities. And who would have ever thought, you know, a young kid from Aroostook County, which is known for producing loggers, you know, farmers, and really just hardworking people, would ever make it to NASCAR. I think it's quite tremendous, and I worked hard, but at the end of the day, like I said, I had so many great people supporting me behind the scenes.
And tell us a little bit more about your experience in government. What makes you qualified to represent Maine's 2nd Congressional District?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, we'll kind of get right into my business experience. And I think what we're seeing across the political spectrum right now is people are tired of sort of career politicians, people that just are there for 20, 30, 40 years. Some of them have never worked a real job in their lives, never hired people, never managed people. And I don't think you get a good perspective of what it takes to be a successful, quote, politician if you don't have experience in the private sector. And I have experience in the private sector. I mean, I own my own business since I was 16. By the time I was 18, I could legally sign checks. You know, I was managing my race team at the time, and I was traveling across New England and eventually started touring across the whole United States. But I mentored under some very, very, very successful business people. You know, business people that we look at that I've been able to work underneath, and they just taught me so much about, you know, how to manage people, how to balance budgets, how to build businesses and build companies, and I was able to do that. And I think that perspective is especially important in today's climate when we have a record national debt. You know, some would look at the United States as maybe being on the backside of a country that you would deem to be successful. when 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, people were looking at the United States as being leaders on the world stage. People are wondering if we're even going to be able to pay our bills. You know, seems like every couple of months we're headed to a government shutdown or government default, and I think that's just totally unfortunate. And that's why having people who have business experience, people who have led companies, I think is important. And that's the perspective that I bring, right? I'm a young professional, similar to you. We're in our 30s, but I actually think that that's an asset nowadays, right? Because it's going to take new ideas. If we're going to move this country forward, if we're going to move the state forward, we've got to start getting the next generation involved, especially the next generation that understands where they came from. And I certainly understand where I came from.
So we've talked a bit about your background, personally, politically, your youth, and that kind of leads me to our next question here. What sets you apart from your Republican opponent, Representative Mike Sobolewski?
Yeah, I had the pleasure of serving with Mike in the legislature. I think we come from different backgrounds. I think anybody that wants to run for office nowadays should get the respect of the people. And you know, Mike's had an opportunity to tell his story. My story is, you know, of very rural, humble upbringings, right? We talked about my grandfather, talked about our family business and the sacrifices that we had to make to be able to be successful. I think the business background is really what people are looking for. People are looking for some young folks to start getting involved in politics, who care for our country, who care for our state, who are tired of seeing young kids move away and people say, you know what, I have to leave the state in order to go to college, get a higher education. There's no opportunity for me in Maine. I'm tired of hearing that. I really am. I'm really tired of hearing that because I think Maine is a gem. There's tremendous opportunities around the state, but we have to get some forward-looking people, and a part of that next generation is who are the people that are going to stay here, who are the people that are going to make sacrifices so that when our kids and our grandkids are born, that they can be proud of not only being born here, going to school here, but raising a family and owning businesses and eventually retiring. And I think right now there's just not everybody's on the same page with that. And I'm definitely different from that perspective. I believe that in order for us to move the state forward, we are going to have to work together, right? I'm a Republican, but I'm running against hopefully Jared Golden, who's a Democrat. But at the end of the day, whoever wins, we have to figure out how to work together because people are tired of the inter-party fighting, and it's like me against that person, and nothing ever happens. It's why I got involved in politics in the first place, to be honest. My motto on the campaign trail when I ran for State House was, time to put people over politics. And it's certainly something that I would take to D.C. because right now D.C. desperately needs that mentality of, you know what, there is something more important than party. It's about putting our constituents first and about putting the people here in the state first, regardless of what political party you belong to.
And jumping ahead, looking to November now, if people, Maine voters, are heading to the polls and they have the choice to vote for you or Jared Golden, why should they vote for you?
Well, I say Jared is a really nice guy. I mean, I think it's important, especially in today's divided political climate, that you respect your opponent, and I certainly have respect for Jared. But I think when people go to the ballot box this November, they're going to be looking at two futures, right? A future of the status quo, what's going on now. I'm getting a feeling that people are not too happy with what's going on right now, whether it's the Biden administration, whether it's Jared Golden as a 2nd District congressman. We need much more aggressive leadership in the 2nd District because the 2nd District, despite having so much in terms of natural resources, the people are great, they're hardworking people, they're falling behind the rest of the state. The 2nd District is falling much more behind the rest of the state. You look at things like the poverty level, economic development, education. We're not getting what we need in the 2nd District, and I think it's going to take a congressman who's not only active in D.C., a congressman who can meet with people here in the district, bring people together every single day, every single week. And I think what we're seeing with Jared Golden is that as more time goes on, he started to absorb what it's like to be a politician that goes and runs 3 terms, 4 terms, 5 terms, and he's not showing up for the people in the district. As I meet with voters who have previously supported Mr. Golden, they're frustrated that he hasn't followed through, with what they've asked him to do in terms of, just simple things like, hey, can you follow up on this item or that item? I was in Millinocket earlier today touring the closed down mill facilities. I mean, talk about thousands of jobs leaving a community. And I had a random stranger come up off the street on Main Street, and he asked, who I was, and I introduced myself, and I said, I'm running against Jared Golden. He said, I voted for him the first time. I thought he was somebody who could bring people together. But he's never been here, right? And we have 2 mill facilities that need redevelopment. My main focus as a congressman is going to be doing my job in DC, but making sure that we work together here in the 2nd District, because there are businesses who are looking at the 2nd District, not only to expand, but to come in and spend hundreds of millions of dollars. And we haven't seen that that Jared Golden has followed through in those commitments to the constituents here to see that those businesses are successful, and those are good paying jobs for the people in the 2nd District, and that's my focus.
So we've heard some of your core values at this point and some issues for you. What do you feel are the most pressing issues for the state of Maine, and how will you work to address them?
Yeah, so I look at what's going on in our small towns, and we see record high drug overdoses. We see that inflation is at a record high. I mean, it's going down, but technically it hasn't gone down, because every month it goes up 3, 4, 5%, and that's 20 or 30% on your grocery bills. That's a main focus for me right now. I think government spending and government policies have been a big driver behind inflation, and specifically, looking at some of the policies that Jared Golden has voted while he's in Congress, things like the IRA, the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, which most neutral observers will recognize now that actually didn't reduce inflation. It might have actually made inflation worse. It also pushed things like the EV mandates that we're seeing kind of pop up. Biden's mentioned the EV mandates. There was an EV mandate that was proposed here in the state of Maine. A lot of people are pointing towards I think it's 20, 30, 40 billion dollars worth of environmental spending that was lodged into the Inflation Reduction Act that Jared Golden voted for as a reason that these groups are now pushing for an electric vehicle mandate. We've got to secure the border. We've got people coming across that we don't know who they are. While I do feel compassionate that people are escaping some levels of poverty and discrimination in their countries, we have to have an immigration system in our country where people follow the laws. I don't think it's fair that somebody waits 3, 4, 5 years, and then you have an illegal coming to the front of the line, getting dropped off in the United States with a court date potentially, or a hearing for their maybe 3, 4, 5 years down the line. It's not fair. We have an immigration system that does need to get reformed so that we can have people in our country that want to add to the economy, want to raise families, and just add to the prosperity of what America is, because America is the beacon of hope in the world. But it's not fair that we have illegals coming, and a lot of them are using public assistance and government assistance. Meanwhile, you have people that have been here for many years that they can't get assistance, right? I have constituents in the St. John Valley this winter. They said they can't even afford to put heating oil in their tank. They're not eligible for public assistance. Meanwhile, we're housing illegals down in southern part of the state and giving them free rent. So I think there's just a total disconnect. We're all compassionate, but we have to have the rule of law in our country. And I think if we do that, we can have an immigration system that's more aligned with the values that we really hold dear.
And I want to dive a little deeper into some of those topics that you brought up. You mentioned record high overdose rates. Let's talk a little bit about your position on decriminalizing drugs and safe injection sites. Can you give us your thoughts on the ideology behind both decriminalizing drugs and safe injection sites?
Well, I did not vote to decriminalize drugs. Specifically talking about how we can reach people who in some instances are not reachable. I have a personal story in my family where folks are dealing with substance abuse, and I don't know, but I would imagine a lot of viewers out there have similar stories of people that they try to get them into treatment, and there's just a resistance there. So I look at this as, what are we willing to do for our friends, our neighbors, and our family members when they are asking for help? And I think we need to look at every single tool in the toolbox. There's not just one thing that works. If it works for you, it may not work for the other person. So in terms of bringing people in so that they have the treatment and they can get access to people who care for them and can make sure that they're not going to harm themselves, I think that's something we need to look at. But in terms of just decriminalizing drugs, I don't support that. In fact, I think that if we're going to secure the border, that'll actually stop some of the fentanyl that's coming across and poisoning, and killing the kids in our communities. And that's the main thing right now, right? Secure the border, make sure treatment's accessible, enforce the laws right now so that we can go after those that are coming across state lines, put them in jail, don't let them out. If they're bringing drugs that are going to kill our friends and our families in our community, we need to go after the drug dealers. But those that are using drugs, as much pain as they're in, we need to find a way to get them into treatment.
Moving on to the issue of gun control now, something that is, of course, incredibly on the mind of Mainers after the Lewiston mass shooting. You've been on the record saying that you're against the new law that Governor Mills just signed into law. And you said that you believe there's a mental health issue in the state. Can you tell us a little bit about your view and what you would do to solve the issue of gun violence?
Yeah. So guns have been around for centuries, right? We know stories of high school students back in the 70s and 80s going to school with a loaded rifle in the back of their truck and nothing ever happened. I understand that we live in a different world right now, and I do believe that the mental health crisis is one of the most important crises that we're going to have to handle in this decade and perhaps into the next decade. I know people specifically who have reached out for mental health treatment that have been told they're not bad enough, or they're not in a crisis to be able to get help. There's waiting lines in the emergency rooms. The community mental health organizations have been asking for years and years for not only more funding, but for more staff, for more services and more programming. I think the community mental health aspect is great, but we haven't done a good job in making sure that those organizations have built out so that in Fort Kent or in Washington County or in Freiburg, if somebody is in crisis, they can get help right away, not waiting 2 days, 2 weeks, or 2 months. Because when you let 2 months go by, you see what happened in Lewiston, right? That this gentleman had severe mental health issues. His family had reached out to law enforcement. His family knew that he was a danger to himself and the public, and yet there wasn't the infrastructure in place. So I'm all for building out more infrastructure so that we can take care of the mental health crisis. As far as guns are concerned, the Second Amendment is important, right? It's a line that I don't think we should cross, because when we do cross that line, it takes the focus off of mental health, right? We should be focusing on educating our kids and those that are growing up about the dangers of guns, but also how to respect them and how to use them properly, how to store them safely, how to make sure that families don't have guns laying around so that the kids can just use them, right? That's what I want to focus on, and also tackle the root of the problem, which is our failing mental health system.
Moving on now, what is your position on wind farms in the ocean, specifically off of the Gulf of Maine? Let's actually just start with that part of the question.
Well, I was with some lobstermen down in Washington County a few days ago, and we were having coffee, and this was one of the topics that they were discussing. They're very concerned that the offshore wind is going to decimate their industry. And I understand that Governor Mills and the Biden administration, and also my understanding that Jared Golden hasn't really made his opinion on this heard, but his vote on the Inflation Reduction Act actually had quite a bit of, there's many billions of dollars that was appropriated towards offshore wind with his vote on the Inflation Reduction Act. I am somebody that does not support offshore wind. I think that it is way too close to an important industry of ours, which is the lobster industry. And they have other regulations that they're facing right now, like the measure rule, which is going to basically require them to send 60% of their catch back into the ocean. So we're talking about an industry that's being attacked from multiple standpoints. You've got the environmentalists. You have the environmentalists who want to make sure that the whales are protected. But we haven't seen many sightings of these whales either. So I think we have to drill down to this issue and bring the fishermen to the table, have them sit down with these other groups so that they can make sure that their story is being heard. Because what they told me is that nobody seems to be listening to them right now, right? They've asked for help. They've told them that these regulations are way, way, way too burdensome, that they're basically going to go out of business if this stuff continues. And what do they hear from our congressman? A couple months later, he sends a letter. I think that's just totally unacceptable. We need more aggressive leadership to protect this industry farming industry and the logging industry as well, because they're all under attack from different standpoints.
And you did touch on the second part of my question. Do you support Maine fishermen and lobstermen in their fight against NOAA, specifically on the right whale issue?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that if you're looking at the whale issue, we need to look at the work that's going towards the wind turbines. You know, these boats that go out there and have sonar equipment and all that, they have way more of an effect than our lobster men and women that go out there and try to make a living. Once again, I feel like I'm attacking Jared a lot, but unfortunately, his votes when he's in D.C. are not in line with what the men and women in our fisheries want, and his answers to it after the fact are more money, more legislation, more regulations to try to solve the issue that he created in the first place. So I think it's unfortunate, and I'm proud to say that, you know, I have the support of many fishermen. As we were in Washington County, we're going to be touring the rest of the state. But this is an important industry that we have to defend no matter what.
Reproductive rights have been a central focus for some time across the country now, especially in the wake of the overturning of Roe versus Wade. Do you support any kind of federal ban on abortion? If not, why? And if you do, are there any exceptions? Are there any exceptions that you would support or insist on?
No, I don't support any federal legislation. I think that since Roe versus Wade, was brought to the courts, this is now in the states. This isn't the hands of the legislatures, the governors around the country, and as President Trump said, some states are going to have different rules. I think that we need to actually make sure that single moms and parents who want to be parents have the resources they need to be able to raise families. I'm all for more support for moms that are struggling right now. As a Christian, I actually think that that's what we need to do. We need to be compassionate to make sure that these folks are taken care of. I am personally pro-life. I was raised in a French Catholic family in the St. John Valley. You know, I think it's very deeply personal to me that we protect life. But as somebody going to run for Congress in D.C., the Constitution is clear that this is a states' rights issue and it's no longer in the hands of the feds, and I will honor that.
Do you feel that women who seek abortion care or clinicians who provide abortion care should be prosecuted or penalized in any way if it crosses the line of another state law?
No, like I said, I'm personally pro-life, but I'm very compassionate with people in a very sensitive time for them. I mean, my mom was bedridden when she was pregnant for me for like 3-4 months. I mean, she couldn't even leave the house. The doctor thought she was going to lose the pregnancy because before that, I had lost another brother of mine. He was between my older sister and me. So once again, this is a very personal thing, and I don't think we can just say that right off the bat that people need to be penalized. Now, if there's laws that get broken, the law has to be followed. But I'm not looking to create any laws in D.C. regarding abortion, and I think it's a states' rights issue.
Moving on, now looking at an international scale, the U.S. is currently supporting allies in multiple areas of the world, including Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan, either by supporting them with aid or other support as they are directly engaged with other aggressors. As is the case with Israel and Hamas and Ukraine, do you support to continue to provide those countries with assistance?
I think in terms of Ukraine, we've given them billions and billions of dollars. You know, at first I was very interested in making sure that Russia, didn't have a foothold in that region. Increasingly, what I've seen though is people have been concerned that there'd been a blank check for Ukraine and that some of the money may have been wasted. I think in terms of Taiwan and Israel, we fully support them. They're some of our biggest allies. We need to make sure that in terms of Ukraine money, I know that there was legislation that went through the House of Representatives and the Senate recently, and the President signed it. I wouldn't have voted for the Ukraine funding specifically because I think that there are issues here at home, and people know what they are. The border's open, people are coming across. This has been something we've been talking about for years and years and years, and it hasn't been addressed. I think it's important that we address the issues here at home before we start sending billions of dollars overseas. In terms of the Israeli aid, I would have supported that because I think Israel is definitely our most important ally in the Middle East, and we need to make sure that Hamas is defeated.
Absolutely. Moving on now, one of the presidential candidates, former President Trump, believes that presidents should be immune from prosecution for criminal behavior while in office. Do you agree with the concept of presidential immunity?
To be honest, I haven't looked into it. I don't think that I'm going to have immunity if I'm elected to Congress. So I'm not sure, where the dust is going to settle there. But to be honest, I've traveled all the counties in the district. Nobody's asked me about presidential immunity. I know there's other stuff going on right now, and my answer to them is, I think that people are going to have an opportunity at the ballot box to decide whether they're going to support President Trump or President Biden. Right? I'm supporting President Trump because I looked at the economy 5 years ago, and I saw prosperity. I saw people had more money in their pockets. I saw inflation at like 1.5%. The border was being secured. We didn't have multiple wars going on. That's what I think people are going to have the opportunity to decide on. I believe that the voters know and should be able to make that decision, not any court and not anybody else, not unelected people. That's up to the voters to decide who they want their next commander-in-chief to be.
And earlier in our conversation, you brought up the crisis at the southern border. How would you address it, and what role do you think the state of Maine should play in the immigration crisis?
Yeah. Well, Maine has a large border with Canada, and I represent District 1 in the House, and you have a lot of Canadian border there. A lot of it's sparse and not really populated, but we have, Fort Kent, Madawaska, and those areas where a lot of international trade happens. I think the northern border is increasingly becoming an issue because there's so much focus on the southern border. So I'm for additional security in terms of technology, in terms of border patrol, both at the northern and the southern border. I think by finishing the border fence, it's going to allow us to reinstate Remain in Mexico, which was a policy during the Trump administration that allowed these people that were looking for asylum to actually stay in Mexico and not come into the United States and then be dispersed throughout the whole country. So I think securing the border, number one, looking at technology, looking at increased border patrol presence around just to fill in the gaps that people are coming across. But I think what you'll find is once the southern border is secure, that we will also realize that there were quite a few gaps at the northern border that have to be secured, and that's what I'm focused on because that's where I grew up, so I understand the northern border.
All right, Representative Terrio, we have just under a minute left. I'm going to leave the floor open to you to end with anything that you'd like to get out there.
Well, I appreciate it, first of all, and thank you to the viewers back home. I am very proud to be from Aroostook County, from Fort Kent, part of a French-speaking French Catholic family in the St. John Valley. I believe in hard work. I believe in making sacrifices for the community. My grandfather sacrificed so much for me as a kid, and I saw my grandmother right side by side with him building a successful business. But what we're seeing in the 2nd District is that economically, as far as the next generation, as far as education, people feeling like there's hope, we're not seeing that as much as we used to. So we need to make sacrifices, and I'm willing to do that as a young person here in the 2nd District so that we can bring our economy back, so that we can have jobs and bring manufacturing back so that people have hope for the future. So I would ask for your vote on June 11th. I'm running as a Republican in the 2nd District and would appreciate your vote. You can vote early, and hope everybody has a great rest of your day.
Representative Austin Terrio, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And a note about Mr. Terrio's interview, which you just saw. Our time ran out before he was asked the last 2 questions. So you will find his responses to those on our website, foxbangor.com.
And stay tuned, everyone. Coming up, you'll hear from Representative Mike Sobolewski. We'll be right back. So, Mike, thank you so much for joining us for this very important conversation. We appreciate your time today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so let's just start out, for anyone who hasn't looked you up on the internet or doesn't already know you personally in some way, shape, or form, tell us a little bit about who you are, maybe what part of Maine you're from, just your general background.
Well, I'm a Gardner boy,
Yeah.
from Gardner originally. That's where I grew up, went to Gardner High School. Shortly after, enlisted in the Marine Corps.
Okay.
Served at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. I loved being a United States Marine. Yeah. And when I got out of the Marine Corps, I used the GI Bill to go to the University of Maine at Machias down east. Okay. And then started a couple of small businesses. Liked that very much, enjoyed it. A fitness equipment company, and then Pirates Cove Tavern in Augusta. That was a lot of fun to do those. Okay. Then I chased a dream and followed it all the way down to New York City in film and television and acting. Okay. and I enjoyed that very much.
Yeah.
And then that all changed in September of 2001 when our nation was attacked.
Right.
And
So tell us how that changed your course.
that's how that changed the course a lot.
Yeah.
And I went to the Midtown North Police Precinct, volunteered to get down, leaned on my Marine Corps training, went in and spent most of the first 72 hours down there on the rescue teams. When that was over, we started filming again on the shows about 6 months later.
Okay.
Got the career back, moved back to Maine in 2011. I now live in Phillips, just the other side of Rangeley, the other side of Farmington, heading towards Rangeley, and I serve in the United States, in the Maine State Legislature in the 73rd District, which is one of the largest districts in the state.
So that's a perfect segue. So let's talk a little bit more. You have a very varied background in terms of your life experience, which is neat. Let's talk a little bit more about your political work and kind of what your qualifications are in that regard.
Well, I serve on 2 committees down there. I serve on Labor and Housing and Environment and Natural Resource. I like both committees very much. I'm very deep into Environment and Natural Resource. They both take a lot of time. But I also deal with a lot of issues on my own. I spent 6 months working on the EV mandate issue before I finally was able to get that killed through not only working with the Board of Environmental Protection and the Department of Environmental Protection, but also working in the committee to bring my bill forward to put an end to it. I got through a bill for responsible mining of lithium, another amendment to save our redemption centers, which were failing badly. I've been able to champion some real solid legislation, and working in a Democrat-controlled environment, it's hard, but you need to fight. Dig your heels in, fight. When you find a roadblock, pivot, go a different way, but keep on mission and get the job accomplished.
How do you also hopefully working in a bipartisan fashion and also fostering cooperation, because that's not something we see a lot at the national level these days.
That was very important with the EV mandate. If it hadn't been for, and I'll say this, being a Republican, if it had not been for President Troy Jackson and Speaker Talbot Ross, I would not have got that done. I had multiple meetings with them just to get it through our legislative council process because it was an after-session bill. That I needed their help to do that, and they did that. And then they stepped up after 4 meetings with each one individually and co-sponsored the legislation for me. That was huge. I don't know of another bill Republican bill that's happened on, and that got it under the hammer. That sent it straight through, and we put an end to that EV mandate.
Well, so let's talk a little bit about what makes you qualified to represent the 2nd District of Maine in the U.S. Congress, and then what sets you apart from your candidate, from the other Republican challenger, Austin Terrio. So starting with, what you feel makes you qualified to serve now in the United States Congress.
Life experience, no question about that. I've had enough life experience that I've been able to have my successes and failures, my wins and losses, my fall downs and got knockdowns. That all builds character, and that all builds determination. So I know how to deal with strong issues that come my way. I know how to find my way through them. What differentiates me from my opponent? I have a 100% conservative voting record on the floor of the House, as rated by the conservative union CPAC. My opponent, 60th out of 61, the most liberal Democrat-aligned voting record on the floor. That's one of the biggest differences between the two of us. We're nowhere near alike. We're miles apart age-wise, and most of what I've accomplished has been, a lot of it was before he was even born. So, it's just a big difference between the two of us.
And so then moving on, why then do you feel that you're a better candidate to serve the 2nd District than the current incumbent, Jared Golden? Let's talk about some differences there.
Well, Jared, I have a lot of respect for Jared Golden. He served our nation in the Marine Corps. He's a fellow vet, and I respect his service and appreciate his service, and congratulate him on his new addition to his family, by the way. But we're different in ideology. We have a lot of similar things, but we're different that way. He voted for the Inflation Reduction Act, which is the Green New Deal spending bill, and we've seen what that's doing right now to our electrical costs around the state here in Maine with the wind and the solar that's there. I am in favor of wind and solar. If you like it, put it on your house. And that's the only way I see that. He voted for D.C. statehood, which I disagree with completely. That would have put 2 more Democrat senators in D.C., and that was very partisan to do that. There's a long litany of things. His stance on the AR issue, on gun rights. I have a rating from the Gun Owners of America. He has an F. We're not the same, even though we have similarities in our background. I'm looking very much forward to debating him.
Okay. All right, so let's move to the issues, and we'll start at the state level. And this is just kind of a general question. What do you feel are the most pressing issues facing the state of Maine, and how will you work to address each of them?
Well, it would be addressing them from a congressional level. So it would be addressing them from DC.
Yep.
And when you're in that position, one of the first things I did was I did the research on what the job is of a congressman.
Yeah.
You serve on your committees, of course. You propose amendments. You propose legislation and resolutions. You have your constituent services. And constituent services is very important to me. People need to know that they're taken care of and someone's got their back. Right now, it's the economy. People talk about the border. Of course we want to seal the border. We want to make the border secure. But I believe that regardless of how secure we seal that border, they're going to find a way in here. And we're going to have to deal with that. The economy is number one on everyone's mind. The prices are going through the roof. Everything is so expensive now. Fuel is starting to go back again. I paid $3.70 for it the other day. I said, oh my gosh, come on. My electric bill has doubled. Food prices have gone up. That is the most important thing to people right now is, the economy and what's happening with that. Electricity is another big one. Of course, you want to say freedom. You want to say the deficit. You want to say all the big things. I want to build the wall. Well, you can't do that. You have to pick the fights you can win and join the ones that you can help in.
Okay. So let's talk about your position, again, looking at some maybe more local or state issues. Let's talk about your position on decriminalizing drugs. That's been a proposal, and safe injection sites. This is definitely, a hot button topic. What is your particular ideology on those types of proposals?
I was extremely disappointed to read that the state of Maine had pretty much decriminalized, made them a civil penalty, fentanyl, heroin, cocaine, opioids. I think that is a very bad way to go. Safe injection sites, I voted against that. My opponent is in favor of that. And we can't seem to get him to answer why he's in favor of fentanyl as a recreational drug. That's always a pivot to the border or something. But that is not the answer to drug addiction at all. That answer is abstinence and treatment is what that is.
Okay. Moving on now, if you're done addressing that issue. Sure. Okay, moving on to gun control and gun rights. After the mass shooting in Lewiston, Austin Terrio had voiced thoughts that what happened there is a mental health issue, and he opposed the new law that Governor Mills had just enacted. What are your views on that issue, and what would you do to support your view in Congress?
I was in Lewiston that day, and earlier that morning, that just shook everyone right to the core. Unfortunately, that is a tragedy. But putting everyone in the same basket, whether it's in a mental health basket or whether it's in a gun control or gun rights basket, is a bad idea. We're not all the same person. We're not all Andrew Card. There's been discussions that it was a mental health issue with him, an anger issue with him. I've heard a lot of stories, a lot of them. There was communication problems between the military and local authorities with him. There were communication problems with local authorities. I've heard every story there is in the book about this guy. And the main thing that we have to take from that is that everyone's rights are sacred, not just Andrew Card's. And we need to make sure that we protect gun owners. I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. Shall not be infringed means exactly that. And the 72-hour waiting period, we're going through that fight right now. We've got gun owners, gun shows. They're going to be shut down. It's going to cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars in tax revenue in our state. So we're dealing with it on a number of issues. We're talking earlier, you and I off camera, about Dorothea Dix and Riverview. We need more funding for those facilities so they can have more beds available, so they can have more staff available and the equipment that they need to make sure that we can take anybody that has a mental problem or psychological problem, instead of putting them in a hospital or in a jail cell to wait until there's a room, we need to be able to transition them straight into where they can get help.
Okay. All right, so, and we want to just make a note that the Lewiston gunman was Robert Card.
Card.
So we just want to make sure that we have that right. All right, as far as your position on wind farms transitioning to a different sort of state topic with national ramifications, your position on wind farms in ocean waters, good idea, bad idea, infringement on, Maine fisheries. We'll start with that.
Bad idea. I've been in a number of briefings on the wind port. And I didn't like it from the very beginning. I did a lot of research on that, and up and down the eastern seacoast, especially in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, they have, I think there are 10 of them that they're working through right now. One has already given up, that was New Bedford. Out of the 9 other ones, 6 of them are running into financial difficulties. When the subsidies run out, they can't sustain themselves. They're having trouble selling their energy off. They're having trouble with their contracts. And I just read a report that there have been in excess of 50 whales and dolphins that have died up and down the East Coast since the first of the year. So offshore wind, I don't think it's viable. I voted against the project on Sears Island, specifically because I do not believe the wind port or the wind array out there is viable. They did move it from LMA1, the lobster management area, and our major fishing grounds to the east, moved it south as a little bit of an appeasement, but it still is going to be a problem. As far as the wind farm goes, up north, Aroostook County, King Pine, that is a project that I did not vote for. I didn't like it. My opponent did vote for it. It's 92% foreign owned. This is American energy on Maine soil. 92% owned by foreign entities. I think it's 80% New Zealand, 2 different companies, 40% each, and the other one I think is Australia. Even the Kiwi pension is involved in that. So that is American energy being foreign owned, and they're going to use eminent domain to build a transmission corridor down through the center of our state so that they can feed into the New England grid. Once again, I voted against that project, and I voted against eminent domain. My opponent voted for both.
You had previously mentioned the impact to the environment and to wildlife, so a follow-up to the wind farm issue, talking about do you support Maine fishermen in their fight against the proposed regulations from NOAA, which are on hold right now, but the proposed regulations against the lobster fishery from NOAA on the right whale issue?
I would support the whales, of course, 100%. I'm not familiar enough with it to be able to give you a really solid answer on that. Okay. But I support our fishermen, of course I do. These are main jobs, you know, and our right whales, it was the lobster traps and those little teeny lines that were the problem and why we kicked them out of the Gulf. Now you've got cables that they want to put in there that are big around almost as a car. It just doesn't make sense in what they're doing. So I wholeheartedly support our lobstermen and our fishermen.
Okay. Let's segue to looking at some national issues that, of course, have been top of mind lately. Yeah. Since you seek to serve in the U.S. Congress, these are issues that you'll certainly come up against. So let's take a look at a few of them. Reproductive rights, certainly a central focus for many, and we saw the ramifications of that in the midterms. So especially since the overturning of Roe v. Wade. So do you support, in theory, this doesn't have to be specific, but do you support, in theory, any kind of federal ban on abortion? If not, why? And if you do support any kind of federal ban, what would the ins and outs be as you would propose them?
What I can say about that is I am pro-life. I come from a very big family and a very poor family. Yeah. We started off very, very, very poor. Okay. We had 7 kids in 9 years. All 7 of us had 1 bedroom. And those were decisions that needed to be made way back then, and my parents went for life, and I support life completely. I've recently been given a 100% rating and an endorsement of the Parents' Rights in Education. I support our parents, I support our unborn, and I am pro-life.
Do you support any kind of exceptions to a federal ban, say in the case of preserving the life of the mother, if the life of the mother was in peril, or in the case of rape and incest? Do you support, exceptions to a federal ban, or are you somebody who feels like a federal ban is a federal ban?
I would have to take a look at the federal ban, look at the language, and see what I thought of it at the time. I haven't made a decision as far as federally. That's the first time I've been asked that question. Okay. So I would have to take a look and see exactly what the language said before I would determine what I need to. What my stance would be on that. The life of the mother comes up constantly. I'm asked that constant question all the time about that. And quite frankly, my answer a number of times has been, if I was a husband laying there, sitting beside my wife who's getting ready to give birth, and the doctor tells me, you have to decide between your unborn child and your wife, and I've got 3 little kids at home waiting for mommy to come home, I know what my personal decision would be. And I would not take I would not take the mother away from my children.
Understood.
That's what I would do.
Understood. We appreciate your candor on that. And a follow-up to that, there's also been conversations about women seeking abortion care or clinicians who provide it being prosecuted or penalized in some way. So would you support any legislation that sought to legally penalize women seeking abortion care if there was a federal ban or a state ban, or the clinicians that provide it?
There again, I don't know enough about that issue. I would
Okay.
have to do more research and more investigation on that issue and see what the language was in order to take a look at that. I'm open-minded. I think that everything has value in looking at. What I agree with and what I don't agree with depends wholeheartedly on what's in the language. I've learned that down in Augusta, that you really need to look into issues deeply in order to find the root of the issue and be able to find the root of your emotions in it.
Okay. Let's move now to the global stage, specifically some of the conflicts ongoing. The United States currently supporting allies in Israel, supporting Ukraine's fight, and then also supporting Taiwan as well. In terms of supporting, continuing to provide those countries with assistance, where do you stand on continuing to provide aid to Ukraine, aid to Israel, aid to Taiwan?
I was relieved to see, in a way, yesterday, with Hamas agreeing to the ceasefire. The Israeli ground forces were getting ready to go into Jaffa, and that's where their leadership is. No wonder they surrendered, and said, we're going to give up and we'll negotiate. But you got to remember, back in October, they did the same thing as well, and that didn't last very long. This may just be a way for them to sneak out the back door, regroup, and then go at it again. You got to remember, these are men that plotted, planned, and schemed behind closed doors to murder, rape, and kidnap women and children. They can't be trusted.
Right.
I didn't agree with Mike Johnson on the aid to Israel. I am all for Israel having the right to defend herself. I am. But that bill wasn't the right way to do it.
Okay.
That had $9 billion in aid for Gaza, which was going to go straight to Hamas, in my opinion. So we're funding Israel. We're funding Hamas. Who's going to win in that fight? The military-industrial complex was going to win, and a lot of people were going to die.
Okay.
Just how much are we going to have to give to Ukraine? We've given them almost, what, $250 billion now? How much is too much? We need to find what that ceiling is. How much is too much?
Okay. And did you have thoughts on Taiwan?
Taiwan, not really. I mean, protection from China, yes, sure. TikTok was the other side of that. I think they threw that in there just to kind of take everyone's minds away from, the big dollar amounts, to be honest with you. But I don't know enough about the situation and the boots on the ground in Taiwan. It hasn't been that out in the atmosphere like Ukraine and Israel have.
Yeah, that's true for sure.
Yeah, I don't know.
Let's talk about one of the other issues going on, and this isn't a military issue, but certainly one that's generated a lot of conversation. One of the presidential candidates this year, former President Trump, contends that presidents should be immune from prosecution for criminal behavior while in office. Do you agree with that conceptually? What do you think would be the effect on the American judicial system and the country overall if such an idea would be, put in stone, that presidents can't be prosecuted for criminal behavior? Yeah.
Well, I believe that issue's come up because it is Donald J. Trump. We haven't seen it before, criminal prosecution that I'm aware of. I believe that while the president is in office, he is immune from that stuff unless it's egregious. I mean, you walk up and shoot somebody, that's one thing. But for what they're trying to do to him right now, I'm very disappointed with the route that they're going with my president. I've been a fan of Donald Trump for 40 years. My campaign team and I are going to do anything we can to help him get elected. But I think they're going way too far with this right now, and it's being done because of political pressure and because of the upcoming election. If Donald Trump was not running for office right now, they wouldn't be going anywhere near him for any of this. So it's a political move.
But when he asserts that he should be immune from criminal prosecution, like this isn't something that someone else cooked up, it's something that he himself has said should be the case. So what I'm just asking is, do you agree with that ideologically?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Looking at immigration, you had previously alluded to the southern border, so let's return there for just a moment. How would you address the crisis at the southern border, either in legislation that you were to draft or simply support? How would you address the crisis at the southern border? And as a caveat to that, what role should the state of Maine play in the immigration crisis? So let's just talk about your view on the southern border first.
Well, the southern border and the northern border, they are connected. We need to defend both of them vigorously. The southern border, I think I had said earlier, I believe that even if the wall was completely built, I believe we need to finish the wall. And I believe that if the wall was built, they're still going to find a way to come in here. We need to put more assets and more resources into the immigration onslaught that we're facing right now. These are now economic migrants. They're not coming here because they're escaping persecution, death, or anything like that. They're coming here to have a better life. A lot of people say it's because we need workers in America. Okay, if we get rid of the drugs and we start getting people off from the government dime and get them back to work, I think that can make a substantial difference there. So I think we need to take care of our drug problem. I think that's one of the worst things that we have going right now. We have trafficking, that human trafficking that's coming across the border. The amount of fentanyl coming into our country is unbelievable. If it was, I don't know exactly what the overall solution is to it. For me, when I get down to Washington, D.C., I would have to take a look and see what bills are in process, what's in place. You gotta understand when you get down there, there's senators, there's a ton of people who are already down there. They have legislation in the works. So to say I'm gonna put in a bill to fix the border, that might be the case.
Right. But
first you need to get in there and you need to find out what the lay of the land is. Who's doing what? And what they have out there for fights you can join before you pick one.
Okay. Another issue that is always close to our hearts is taxes. Always a joy.
Love the tax man.
Always a joy,
Love
yes.
the tax man.
All right. In your view, are wealthy Mainers and wealthy Americans overall currently paying their fair share of taxes?
Last year we had a bill that came in which was an act to phase out state income tax. I did a lot of research on that bill, and I looked at all the revenue streams that we have coming in. We have enough revenue streams with our deficit, with the money that's coming in, and our I'm not saying deficit, leftover money after the budget.
Surplus.
Surplus. There we go. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And a surplus.
Yeah.
We're going to have nearly $1 billion surplus. And plus with all the money that's coming in from the different streams that we have more than enough money. We don't need to keep taxing on state income tax. I voted to phase out state income tax. My opponent voted, was one of the very few that voted to continue taxing Mainers. So I believe the tax code is fair. I believe it's just. And I believe that we need to get rid of state income tax in Maine.
Okay. All right. So that was, just to be clear, so you feel the tax code as written with the current structures in place is just?
Yes.
Is okay. All right. Just wanted to clarify there. So let's sort of wrapping up, and we have about 5 minutes left. Okay. What should people focus on as they consider who to elect to serve in Maine's 2nd Congressional District?
Definitely the voting record. Like I said earlier, that's incredibly important. I have the #1 conservative voting record. My opponent voted to decriminalize prostitution, voted for safe injection sites, was the only Republican that joined a bill last year to spend $6 million in state tax money on public art. That list goes on and on. Take a look, solid look at the voting records. And also keep in mind, it's going to take a Marine to defeat Jared Golden. It's going to take a military veteran to defeat him. CD2 Maine has the highest per capita military veteran and veteran-aligned families in the nation. We're made up pretty much 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, Democrat, Republican, Independents. Those numbers vary a little bit, but not by a lot. Jared Golden gets the military vote because he's a veteran. I'm a member of the American Legion. I deal with my brother and sister veteran issues down at Togus, and a lot of them Republicans. I'm a Republican. I voted for Jared. He's a vet. So it's going to take another veteran to defeat him. And I believe that I'm the guy to do that, and that we can, as a Republican Party, get to 51% on election night and go right past ranked choice voting.
Okay. Final thoughts on why people should support you, and also take this opportunity, if there's something you wanted to touch on that we haven't touched on yet, feel free to do so now. And then just some final thoughts on why you feel folks should support you. in this race.
Well, I appreciate that very much, and thank you for the time here today.
Yeah, you're welcome.
The hot seat's always the hot seat.
It is. It is indeed.
It is. It's quick on your feet.
Yeah.
And I'm a good man. I'm an honest man. I work hard, and I'm an up at 4 o'clock, bed at 8 o'clock guy.
Yeah.
And my day starts at 4 o'clock. And I work on issues, and that's all I do is work on issues. I have my fingers in a lot of pies down there. Right now, the illegal Chinese marijuana issue is hot on my plate right now, and I'm working hard on that. So there are a lot of issues that I just dig my teeth into. I'm a hard worker, and as I said, Marine vet, it's going to take a vet to beat Jared Golden. I have the best record on the floor of the House.
Okay. I'm told we have 2 minutes left. I'm going to give them to you if you have anything else you'd like to add.
Just going on with that, moving on with that. I've been in the Republican Party for decades. My ideologies is based in my Christian values and my conservative posture. My opponent's been in the Republican Party for months. That's it. Was going to join the Democrat Party beforehand. So we're two completely different people as far as that goes. I serve on the Franklin County Republican Committee. I'm the committee man for the committee with a voice and a vote on state level issues. So my roots are deep in the Republican Party.
All right. Well, we can't thank you enough for coming in and spending some time with us. We so appreciate it. It's certainly a big election coming up.
It is.
And so again, we thank you for your time today, Mr. Sobolewski.
Thank you very much.
All right. That concludes our Conversations with the Candidates special. We hope it gave you important insight as to who each candidate is, helping you make a more informed decision when you head to the polls.
We hope you'll join us for our Maine Decides primary election coverage on primary day. That's June 11th. Thank you for watching, everyone.
And as always, we'll see you for ABC 7 and Fox 22 News each night. Good night, everyone.